actually perversely mean that it's more polluting than a petrol car. So it's those types of things that I think need to be thought through. But again, that all relates back to long-term thinking in government, which is usually an acronym of the last thing that governments are known for.
Ruth, you had something to say about this on Twitter, and I'm sure Chris has got something to say about it as well. Joseph Babbage from the Babbage wine family, discharged without conviction after importing cocaine and other drugs on the web. He ordered the drugs in an attempt at self-medication. It was a, quote, mad-headed attempt at self-medication to address a long-standing serious illness where conventional medicine has not helped, said Justice Simon France. And once again, the consideration of a conviction affecting overseas travel was also cited. So my question to you isn't about the court's decision, really. It's about the same consideration being applied to others.
100%, and that's my concern. I actually don't. I think it's a considered judgment. My problem is not with the judgment. My problem is what precedent does this set? And I feel like it's double standards. You know, there's enough bias in our justice system or in our society already, racial, gender, money, and this one is money and potentially racial. Would a poor Māori boy be able to get the same legal support to have this decision reviewed and made?
A poor Māori boy just as depressed?
Just as depressed, okay. Concerned about his potential for travel. Yep. I'm really concerned about the double standards.
Chris?
Well, ironically, the major criticism that's ever been levelled against this legislation, which has been around for quite a number of years, is that poor Māori boys do get the benefit of it. And the tweet that I thought was just fantastic was from Meharangi Forbes, who said, "Where's all my trolls? Where are all the people who have given me such a hard time about this legislation when it's been applied to the Māori King's nephew or to other young Māori men who are rising sports stars," which is the vast majority of circumstances, not the Māori men, but the rising sports stars. Where are they complaining about here? I don't have a problem with the law. I do have a problem with this judgment, because if we wouldn't be able to count up the amount of times that people have been on Class C controlled drug prosecutions in court who have said they've been using it for medication and have failed to be able to rely on this legislation, a discharge without conviction, and have been convicted, which a Class C controlled drug can have quite significant and disastrous effects upon one's travel and one's future in work. So as the seriousness of the offence goes up, the less opportunity for this remedy to be made available. And I think it's got it wrong. I disagree with the judgment.
Okay, two interesting points of view. And a quick question to ask before we go. Donald Trump has a higher approval rating than Barack Obama did at the same point in his presidency, according to a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Mr. Trump's approval rating is sitting at 47%, his best yet. So, shortest question of the day, why?
The world's gone mad, Jim, that's why, and I'm going to meditate, because I just can't handle that figure. I just can't deal with it.
Okay, so Chris has gone to meditate.
I can't even, I'm actually going to teach him how to meditate. I can't even talk about that person. I just can't deal with it.
Okay, you've both gone to meditate.
Sorry.
So and I said anything as well.
In fact, someone says you've said it 76 times, but I think they might be exaggerating. So that's the end of the panel by necessity. Now it's Lisa Owen's first night tonight on Checkpoints. I hope you'll give her a warm text welcome, and welcome to her to the fold. Chris Gallivan, Ruth Money on the panel. Thank you both.
Thanks, team. It's been fun.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks for your company, everybody, and we're back tomorrow.
Ki te whakarongo mai koe ki te rero e rangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint and I am Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, Checkpoint has obtained a highly abusive text message sent from a female National MP to Jamie Lee Ross, with whom she was in a relationship with. It was sent back in August. Now, it comes as leader Simon Bridges announced today a review into workplace and party practices to ensure women feel safe in the workplace. Also tonight, the Turkish president vows to reveal all in the coming hours over the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Controversial Māori leader Sir Ngātata Love dies just a year after being released from prison.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batt in Heuheu. The National Party leader says he wouldn't have done anything differently as the party still deals with the fallout of last week's dramatic events. After unleashing a series of damaging allegations last week, the former National MP, Jamie Lee Ross, is now in mental health care. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
MPs return to Parliament today for this week's sitting session, but the focus is still squarely on the controversy engulfing National. The leader, Simon Bridges, says he's been making decisions in difficult circumstances and stands by his actions. The party president, Peter Goodfellow, also defends his handling of a complaint he received about Mr Ross in 2016, after which he brokered an agreement between the woman and the MP. He says both parties were happy to keep it confidential and to move on. Meanwhile, Simon Bridges will get independent advice about the culture of the National Party to make sure women feel safe and know they can speak up. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The Serious Fraud Office is refusing to say if it will investigate possible fraud or wrongdoing at a district health board. Counties Manukau DHB said today it has referred questions about financial reporting to the SFO for a full investigation. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
A long-awaited audit report released last month revealed financial management and expenditure problems at the DHB between 2013 and 2016. They included a series of health conferences that were reported to have made a $500,000 profit when they actually made a $1 million loss. The Health Ministry head, Ashley Bloomfield, said then the behaviour was unacceptable, but no wrongdoing was identified. Today, however, the DHB said further investigation and advice indicate fraud or other serious wrongdoing by former staff may have taken place. It's declined to comment further. The SFO would only say it has received the referral. Ko Karen Brown, tēnei.
An Auckland rescue helicopter crew has had a near miss with a drone as it was on its way to a serious car crash in Northland. Pilot James Taylor says they were flying at a height of 400 metres over Takapuna when they saw the drone flash past on Sunday evening. He says it was only 3 or 4 metres away from the helicopter. Mr Taylor says there could have been serious consequences if the drone actually hit the chopper.
Some of them can be reasonably big and heavy, and at the sort of speeds we fly at, there's a good chance it would smash the windscreen if it hit our windscreen, or if it hit our rotors or tail rotor, then it could do some fairly significant damage there. So I guess absolute worst case, potentially it could actually take the helicopter down.
James Taylor says they've told the Civil Aviation Authority about the incident. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has played down the prospect of a bipartisan deal to resettle refugees in New Zealand. His government had previously hinted it may accept New Zealand's offer to take up to 150 refugees, but only if Parliament passes legislation ensuring they can never travel to Australia. The Australian Labor Party has historically opposed that legislation, but this morning softened its stance, saying it would support it if it was watered down so it solely applied to those refugees sent to New Zealand. Mr Morrison says he'll consider that, but warned that diluting the bill could encourage people smugglers.
You don't get to negotiate with people smugglers based on horse trading in the Australian Senate. This is why Labor stuffed it up so much last time they're in. They thought that's how you manage this. It's just not how it works. You've got to have clear policies.
The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Striking bus drivers will cause little disruption to services this afternoon in Auckland. Auckland Transport says fewer than 20 services should be cancelled this afternoon, and all Ritchie's Murphy buses will now be running as normal. More than 150 drivers at Ritchie's Murphy's, Pavlovich and Go Bus walked off the job today, demanding better pay. Scores of services were cancelled this morning in Hamilton and West and South Auckland. Lena Walker, who's been a bus driver for about 40 years, says the long hours she works are exhausting.
I'm 60 plus now, and they say, when you get older, you're supposed to work less, but not these days. The hours, you've got to work there really long hours to get a decent wage. For me, I do 11 hours, 5 minutes a day.
Lena Walker. The controversial Māori leader Sir Ngātata Love is being celebrated for his role in leading Māori business development. Sir Ngātata died last week, surrounded by his family at the age of 81. He was cremated at a private ceremony on Friday, and news of his death was made public today. Maurice Walden was a close friend to Ngātata Love and had great admiration for him. Mr Walden says Sir Ngā Tata was a leading figure in Māori business tertiary education.
At that time when he came to the fore, there were very few Māori doctorates around, and particularly with his business acumen and skill.
In 2016, Sir Ngā Tata was found guilty of obtaining property by deception and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. A ceremony in his memory will be held at Pipitea Marae in Wellington this Sunday. It's 5:05. Sport. After nearly a year and a half out through injury, all-rounder Corey Anderson is to return to the Black Caps, having been added to the 2020 squad for the side's upcoming series against Pakistan in the UAE. Anderson's currently in Dubai, captaining the New Zealand A side against Pakistan A, but hasn't played for the Black Caps since last year's Champions Trophy tournament in June because of an ongoing back problems which required surgery.
It's obviously been a decent road back, and after the surgery is long, tedious days, but I guess this is what it's for, and to be picked again, it's obviously great feeling and really excited.
Corey Anderson. The New Zealand tennis player Michael Venus has qualified for the ATP World Tour Finals in London next month for the second straight year. The world doubles number 12 and his South African doubles partner Raven Klaasen have been confirmed as the sixth pair to qualify for the prestigious season-ending event. Usain Bolt's A-League bid could end this week, with the Jamaican sprint superstar excluded from Central Coast Mariners training until contract talks are sorted out. The club has reportedly tabled him a $150,000 offer and admits there's unlikely to be an agreement unless a lucrative third-party deal could be found. Bolt reportedly had wanted a $3 million deal. That's the news.
Questions over the state care abuse inquiry.
I think justice delayed is certainly justice denied in this. Get moving, get it done.
Questions about political donations.
Show me the evidence that we have succumbed to issues of influence and interference.
And questions over parliamentary votes.
Parliament is, I think, sitting today, and someone has said, sorry, you can't go and do the job people elected you to do.
Your questions answered. Weekdays from 6 to 9 on Morning Reports with Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson.
Then on 9 to noon, the Auckland University student mental health pilot that's showing promising results. And after 10, Fiona Patton's unlikely political memoir, from sex worker to fierce campaigner to Member of Parliament. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather now through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Mainly fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Isolated afternoon and evening showers possible. Waitomo and Taumaranui to Wellington, cloudy periods, a few drizzle patches tomorrow evening. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. A few spots of rain in South Canterbury late tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, rain in Fiordland with some heavy falls from this evening, spreading into southern Westland tomorrow. A few showers developing further north. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy with scattered light rain today, rain becoming more widespread tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands cloudy, a few drizzle patches from tomorrow afternoon. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thanks, Katrina. Well, welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up, the latest on the death of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. We look at what the coalition government has achieved a year on, and we go live to Suva, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have just touched down. But we begin tonight with the latest on the Jamie Lee Ross story. Now, Checkpoint has obtained a text believed to have been sent to Jamie Lee Ross by a female MP that Mr Ross has admitted having a relationship with. The text is 61 words long and it was sent in August. The message, along with other texts, was provided to us by a supporter of the Botany MP with Jamie Lee Ross's permission. It includes a slew of abuse and personal insults about Mr Ross's appearance and personality. Checkpoint has chosen not to release the exact words of the texts out of concern for the well-being of both the MPs involved. It is not clear what prompted the message. However, it was sent to Mr Ross at 1:19 on a Saturday morning and concludes by saying, "You deserve to die." Simon Bridges announced today he is seeking independent advice on workplace and party practices to ensure that women feel safe. But Mr Bridges doesn't believe that National has a culture problem. While last week several women accused Jamie Lee Ross of bullying and harassment. Mr Ross, who was taken into a mental health facility at the weekend, conceded on Friday that he hadn't been a good husband and he apologised for the hurt he has caused. Mr Bridges and his deputy, Paula Bennett, both declined to be interviewed today. And Simon Bridges says he would not have handled anything differently, but he has been making tough decisions, he says, in difficult circumstances as the party leader. Now, the party president, Peter Goodfellow, also denies trying to cover up inappropriate behaviour by Jamie Lee Ross. Here is our political editor, Jane Patterson. All right, we'll bring you that report as soon as we can. For the moment, though, Turkey is vowing to reveal all over the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the Turkish president is due to give an address later today in the Turkish parliament where he says he will outline the police evidence. Now, Mr Khashoggi went missing after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October the 2nd. Saudi Arabia has given a number of explanations about his disappearance and finally admitted he was killed in what it claims was an altercation inside the building. In the latest twist, in what appears to be an elaborate cover-up, there is video evidence that a body double was used to try and make out that Mr Khashoggi had left the consulate alive and well. And as the BBC's James Robbins reports, international speculation is growing over what the Saudis allege happened.
Significantly, President Trump is now suggesting he doesn't buy the changing Saudi stories, after speaking again to the Crown Prince and also hearing from his own American investigators.
In Saudi Arabia, we will know very soon. We have tremendously talented people that do this stuff very well. They're coming back tonight, tomorrow, and I will know very soon. And I am not satisfied with what I've heard.
Turkish police clearly believe they have assembled a powerful case against Saudi Arabia. They were at a car park to search a car with Saudi diplomatic plates, possibly abandoned after the murder. Turkey's President Erdogan is promising to reveal much more, the truth behind a pattern of Saudi lies. His party spokesman said the facts would emerge.
We are faced with a situation in which a murder has been brutally planned and a lot of effort has been made to cover it up. When we look at it from this point of view, it's a very complex murder.
And a lot hangs on the truth. In the House of Commons, the Foreign Secretary said action against the Saudis should wait for the outcome of investigations. But his Labour shadow, Emily Thornberry, demanded sanctions including...
Will he accept that UK arms sales for the use in Yemen must be suspended pending a comprehensive UN-led investigation into all alleged war crimes?
Jeremy Hunt's response...
She talked about arms sales. The procedures we follow in this country, as she well knows, are amongst the strictest in the world.
The Foreign Secretary, not absolutely ruling out a halt to weapons sales, is pointing away from it. Britain has a lot to lose in money and jobs. After the United States, the UK is the second largest supplier and way ahead of any other country. Germany, though, is suspending its arms exports to the Saudis. The largest question to be answered, to what extent is the Saudi Crown Prince culpable? Many governments do suspect him, just as they blame him for the conduct of Saudi Arabia's military campaign in Yemen.
James Robbins with that report. Controversial Māori leader Sir Ngātata Love has died just a year after being released from prison. The Wellington iwi leader clocked up an extensive list of achievements and roles, but a high-profile fraud conviction was a controversial bookend to his career. However, his friends, family and former colleagues say it shouldn't overshadow the work the former chair of the Wellington Tents Trust did over many decades for Māori. Te Manakōrehi reporter John Boynton has more.
Sir Ngātata Love died last week surrounded by his loved ones at the age of 81. He was cremated in a private ceremony before many even knew he had passed away. Tributes from friends and colleagues paint a picture of Sir Ngātata as a private man who was happiest with his whānau. Charles Watergrave became friends with him while working at the Family Centre Social Policy Research Unit.
Tata was a fantastic guy. I mean, he actually was a very humble guy that worked just extraordinarily hard for his people and achieved an enormous amount.
Sir Ngā Tata Love was a key figure in the Māori business world and was knighted in 2008.
This is an emeritus professor at 2 universities, a CEO of Te Puni Kokiri, a government department, a man who achieved an enormous amount for his people.
The latter years of his life became a public affair after he was found guilty of obtaining property by deception and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison in 2016. He was released from prison because of ill health last year after serving less than a year behind bars. Mr. Watergrave says the trial was a tragic end to his life.
To come from those heights to the sort of levels of humiliation that occurred then, and the cost of all the court cases has just made it so impossible for his whānau, who've had to mortgage houses, even sell houses, to keep up with payments.
Dame Tariana Turia says Sir Ngā Tata made a huge contribution to Māori, and the controversy around the trial was a disappointing end to his career.
You know, for somebody who, as I say, gave so much, but in the end, it's what happened in the end that really defined him, which is sad.
Dame Tariana knew Sir Ngā Tata for many years when he was an emeritus professor at Massey University, and says she learned from him the importance of always being on the front foot.
He had very strong leadership. And I had a lot of time for Ngā Tata because I truly believe that in the end he believed in our people, that he wanted to improve their lives.
Morris Walden was a close friend of Sir Ngā Tata Love and had great admiration for him.
I just regard him as a hero from Tainui, and I mean that very, very seriously because of the things that he had done and has benefited other people.
When Sir Ngā Tata was younger, he followed his father around Taranaki, Whanganui and Ratanapā, learning about the injustices his people had faced. He actively fought against land sales and mismanagement of Māori reserve lands by successive government-appointed Māori trustees. And Mr. Walden said he was one of the first Māori to teach business at a tertiary education level.
At the time when he came to the fore, there were very few Māori doctorates around, and particularly with his business acumen and skill.
And Mr. Walden says he'll miss his friend dearly.
I'm delighted to say that he was a very personal friend of mine, and I'm grateful for having known him.
A ceremony in memory of Sir Ngā Tata Love will be held at Pipitia Marae in Wellington this Sunday. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko John Boynton aho.
And let's go live now to Fiji, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have landed in Suva on the Pacific Island leg of their tour. Island's business magazine journalist Lethua Morvono is at Albert Park in downtown Suva with the gathering crowd, and she joins me now. What is the atmosphere like there?
Hi, Lisa. The atmosphere here at Albert Park in the heart of capital city Suva it's pretty cool. It's rather comfortable. You know how we love our rugby and how we love our crowds. We can do much better than this, but I would say there's a couple of thousands of people here.
And are they excited? I mean, do they have placards or signs?
I don't see any signs, most definitely no placards, but there are Union Jacks fluttering along with little Fiji flags around the place. There's definitely a lot of the international community here, so there's some interest. I can say that people are comfortable and excited to be out here and doing something different, not as big as a crowd that we can muster when it comes to other things Fijians love.
So you think not as popular as Rugby Stars?
Most definitely not as popular, Lisa. But hey, you know what? I was thinking to myself earlier, the crowd can definitely build up. We're here at Albert Park watching a big live screen that is showing us a telecast of the progress of their journey. So they landed a half hour ago, and they've done the guard of honor, all the military formalities, and now, as I understand it, they're meant to be making a courtesy call on our president at Boren House. So it might just build up over the hour. People might crowd in here, but as you might know, we're going through some pretty bad weather, so that might have an effect on the crowds we're getting here.
What's supposed to happen when they arrive?
Well, when they arrive, there is going to be quite an elaborate traditional welcoming ceremony performed by the people of Vunda being on the Western Division of Fiji. And there's been a lot of controversy over the kind of welcome protocols that is going to be taking place. We've all kind of been in the dark about who is actually performing it. So I think that, like the Duchess and the Duke, we're just as excited to see what will happen here today. So formalities, basically traditional ceremonies are welcome, and then they go across the road to the Grand Pacific Hotel, where they will wave from the balcony, reminiscent of the way Queen Elizabeth did in 1953.
When was the last time that you had a royal visit?
Lisa, you know what? We've had quite a few in my career over the past 20 years or so. I have seen two royals come here. Prince Andrew in, I think, 98 or was that 99? And then the Princess Royal Annie came several years after that. But somewhere in between, Prince Charles also came. So royal visits are not a rarity in Fiji. They're most definitely something that we do look forward to. I have seen much bigger crowds than the ones we have here today, though.
All right, thanks for joining us this afternoon. That's Lethor Movono, who is at Albert Park in Suva awaiting the arrival of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Let's return now to our top story. National leader Simon Bridges has today announced a review into workplace and party practices to ensure that women feel safe in the workplace. Now, this comes in light of the Jamie Lee Ross saga and news that the Botany MP was sectioned over the weekend to a mental health facility. Simon Bridges says he would not have handled anything differently, but has been making tough decisions in difficult circumstances as the party leader. The party president, Peter Goodfellow, also denies trying to cover up inappropriate behaviour by Jamie Lee Ross. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Parliament resumed its normal business today, but there was still a sense of shell shock around the place. Allegations flew last week about the conduct of Simon Bridges as leader, and then counter-claims against Mr Ross about bullying and harassing women. He apologised to one of the women for his behaviour towards her and admitted to an affair with another MP. Over the weekend, Mr Ross was admitted to a mental health facility in Auckland. Simon Bridges told reporters today he stands by decisions he's made as leader.
I think that I've done the right thing at every step of this in difficult circumstances. My priority now, of course, is those who've been hurt, including Jamie Lee Ross.
Is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight?
No, I don't believe so. I think we've made the right calls for the right reasons and, as I say, difficult circumstances.
The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters begs to disagree.
Well, he can claim to have handled things well. He's handled them abysmally.
Simon Bridges says he had no prior knowledge about Mr Ross going into care.
I didn't know about that until after the event. I've been given some second-hand accounts, but look, I wouldn't comment on them because I don't know firsthand.
And was he concerned anyone else from the National Party may have been involved?
No, I'm not. I think that this is a matter for, in a sense, the relevant players and authorities, whether that be in health, whether that be police. They can answer as they see appropriate for those matters.
National Party President Peter Goodfellow has also been under scrutiny. In 2016, he helped broker an agreement between Mr Ross and a woman who'd complained about his behaviour. On his way into the National Party caucus meeting this morning, Mr Goodfellow defended his actions, saying the agreement was never about preventing anyone from speaking out.
We haven't used any NDAs. That matter was a private matter. They wanted confidentiality, so they both agreed that it would be kept confidential. That's the only instance that I'm aware of in my time as president. But we've had an issue like that, and it's certainly the only time that the parties have requested confidentiality.
Peter Goodfellow was also asked why Mr Ross was then allowed to run for selection in 2017 despite the complaint.
It was a matter that was raised by a couple of people and was dealt with, and actually to the satisfaction of the parties. We've seen their comments over the weekend about that.
National is now in damage control mode following Jamie Lee Ross's damaging allegations last week. Simon Bridges says he's going to speak with Parliamentary Service this week and get independent advice on whether more can be done to ensure women working at Parliament and for the party feel safe.
They feel that they can confidently come forward on all matters. And I also want to make sure that we are doing the same in the party in terms of volunteers, candidates, staff, enough.
Another aspect of the story has been how political parties handle donations and whether money plays any part in the selection of party candidates. Mr Goodfellow confirmed one of the people discussed in a phone conversation Mr Ross recorded between himself and Mr Bridges in relation to a donation. Colin Zheng is a Nationals Candidates College for 2020.
The Candidates College has only just started, so we've set it up for 2020, the class of 2020, and he's only just entered that. We've got sessions that we'll have later this year. So,
how would he be in the Candidates College if it's a relation or his boss had not made a donation of his size?
Well, I've known him for some time. I think he's actually a good potential candidate for us. I encouraged him to enter the college.
There's also been discussion about how to minimise the influence of wealthy donors on the electoral system. Justice Minister Andrew Little says it may be time to take a fresh look at the rules.
I think there's a natural concern about, and there has been for a long time, about the level of transparency, whether our law provides enough protection, enough transparency. I think there is scope for a debate about that, and I suspect we will have one.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she'd be open to a discussion about whether political parties should be funded by the public.
If I hear from the public that that's something that they want to have that debate around, then by all means, because as I say, I'd rather not having to focus on fundraising and donations to run political campaigns. But at the moment, we're reliant on them for democracy, and so look, if the public want to have that debate, I'm open to hearing it from them.
Deputy Prime Minister and New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters, not so much.
No, the fact of the matter is, if you haven't got market demand for a political party, why should the taxpayer be propping them up?
As of yesterday, the Speaker had not received any notification that Jamie Lee Ross was being held under the Mental Health Act. Trevor Mallard has asked for advice in the meantime about how to best deal with the situation. The National Party still does have the option of invoking the waka jumping law to force Mr Ross, now an independent MP, out of Parliament altogether. Today, Mr Bridges indicated it is unlikely it would do that, but he says he will take action to make sure women coming to work at Parliament and within the National Party feel safe and know they can speak up. Part of that will be by way of internal review, the results of which are unlikely to be made public. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And synthetic drugs have been in the headlines a lot recently and are blamed for multiple recent deaths in Christchurch. People are still coming into Christchurch Hospital at a rate of 1 or 2 a day, and that's about a month on from the Canterbury DHB blaming an influx of people at the emergency department on a bad batch of synthetics. It's been called a public health emergency by the New Zealand Drug Foundation, but in amongst the horror, our South Island reporter Logan Church found a touch rugby team aiming to make a difference. Now, Logan picks up the story from the middle of a tournament held last week in North Hagley Park.
Welcome to Game 3 of the North Hagley Touch Rugby Tournament. We're at the side of pitch 11. It's completely social. Teams come from all over the place, work colleagues, mates, pretty much everyone. But this team I'm with tonight, called Christchurch Street Whānau, are somewhat different. They were brought together by local charity Streetwise. Everyone on this team has a backstory. Some I spoke to were homeless, some struggled with drugs, some have been in and out of the system. For Ben, that is all of the above.
I was in the system going in and out of jail, and there was no help for me on releases of every individual sentence. So there was no help for me, so I had to go $350 and straight to the streets. So yeah.
Can I be incredibly rude and ask you, what were you in jail for?
I was in jail for unlawful escapes custody, which means I just ran from the cops, mate. Yeah.
And how long did you spend in jail?
9 months for that. Yeah, I got sentenced to 18 months and I've done 9 months.
And you mentioned drugs before. Has that been a challenge for you?
I was currently addicted to synthetics, mate. And I'm not currently, sorry. I was previously addicted to synthetics, and it's a tough drug, mate. It's it's bloody taking over all the youth these days and even the elder people. And I just thought to myself, I want to give up, mate, and change my life around. And I started with that, and now I'm currently 6 months clean almost.
But that's been a long, hard road. What's the attraction of synthetics?
I think it's the addictive nature of helping you get over your problems, mate. That's how I thought of it. I thought, helped me get to sleep and helped me get over my worries, and thought that I was living a normal life, but I knew I wasn't because my body was telling me no, it's not normal.
It's not a healthy drug at all, is it?
No way, mate. Yeah. I'm highly against it now, mate, because I've lost a few friends to the synthetics, and...
Have they died?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, lost their lives, yeah. Few of my friends. It's not nice, but... so I'm doing it in their memory pretty much, and trying to help a bit of a whānau to move on,
So you saw some of your friends pass away, and that sort of made you think, I need to get off this.
Yep, and I need to help my friends get off it too, so... Yeah, I don't know how if there's a will, there's a way, but yeah, I pray for that.
At half-time, the score is 3-1 against the Christchurch Street whānau. In this tournament, it's 6-a-side, 3 women and 3 men. Darrini Ratana is now a registered nurse after leaving a past of alcohol and, in her words, antisocial behaviour. She told me this was her second game of touch rugby ever.
I never ever played touch in my whole life. I had no idea how to play, and this is my second game ever in my whole life, and I ended up scoring a try.
For Garrick, he's only just gotten into a house after living on the streets of Christchurch while he worked as a carpenter.
To be quite honest, it didn't really faze me because I had a job to go to, so at the end of the day it was a place to put my head down, and I still would get up and go to work every day.
So you were homeless while you worked as a labourer, as a builder?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was just the way the life went for me. Had a couple of fallouts from friends that I was living with, and it put me on the streets.
At the end of the 40-minute game, the score was... well, no one really knows, and to be frank, no one really cares. That's just not the point. Captain Malachi Tongan explained to me exactly what they were there for.
Leadership for firsters, being a captain, or one of 3, just showing, being a role model to these guys. Most of these guys didn't know how to play touch, and just teaching them and just saying, giving them confidence, giving them encouragement to carry on and just do what they want to do, but in a good sense of things. And that's us.
Bury the radish. 1, 2, 3. Bury the radish.
From the side of pitch 11 at North Hagley Park for Checkpoint, call Logan Church Chennai.
And coming up, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says that if Australia takes up our offer to take 150 refugees and asylum seekers from Nauru, she'd expect women and children to be a priority. Auckland bus drivers walk off the job, and we ask if the coalition government has had any real impact on people's lives in the 12 months since it came to power. We would love to hear your feedback. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The National Party leader is promising to get independent advice about the culture of the National Party to make sure women feel safe and know they can speak up. After unleashing a series of damaging allegations last week, the former National MP Jamie Lee Ross is now in mental health care. Last week, Newsroom published anonymous accounts from 4 women of sexual harassment and bullying by the former National MP, which he denied. But Mr Ross has admitted to an affair with a fellow MP and apologised to a woman he admits he behaved inappropriately towards during a local body campaign his wife was running in. Now, an abusive text sent to Jamie Lee Ross has been revealed to Checkpoint. It was sent by a female MP that Mr Ross has admitted having a relationship with. The text is 61 words long and was sent 2 months ago in August. The message, along with other texts, was provided by a supporter of the Botany MP with his permission. It includes a slew of abuse and personal insults about Mr Ross's appearance and personality, and concludes by saying, "You deserve to die." The Ceres Fraud Office is refusing to say if it will investigate possible fraud at the county's Manukau District Health Board. An audit report last month revealed financial management problems at the DHB between 2013 and 2016 and raised questions about reporting of spending. Despite the Health Ministry saying there was no wrongdoing found, the DHB now says further investigation suggests possible serious wrongdoing or fraud by former staff. An Auckland pilot says a drone which just missed him on Sunday could have seriously damaged his helicopter and its crew. The rescue helicopter was 400 metres above Takapuna on its way to a serious car crash when the drone flashed past on Sunday evening. Drones can't fly any higher than 120 metres and operators must stay 4 kilometres from an airport or helipad. Pilot James Taylor says a drone could potentially take a chopper down or seriously injure somebody in the aircraft. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. Turning now to the business news, I'm joined by Nona Peltier. There's a lot of activity with takeovers at the moment, Nona, and there is interest in big and small companies. What's going on?
Well, it just turns out that our companies are looking a little cheaper now because our dollar's dropped to levels we haven't seen, say, since about a couple of years. So our dollar was quite a lot more, it was a higher value back in 2014. We've been going steadily down since then. And so these days you can buy a New Zealand company for a relatively cheap price compared to what it used to be, even though our share prices have been high in recent months.
So we're a bargain, basically. So who's shopping? Is it America?
It's not just Americans, it's Australians, it's people with companies within New Zealand as well. And of course, Asian companies. We recently had the takeover of Tegel. That was from a Philippines-based poultry producer, Bounty, and that was a successful takeover. We saw recently Infratel and Mercury looking to take over Tilt Renewable, which is an Australian company. We saw more recently there was a offer from Fletcher Building to buy Steel and Tube. That was successfully set aside by Steel and Tube, and right away New Zealand Steel swooped in and took a strategic stake in that company. Just today, for example, we had Tourism Holdings came out and said that a company was interested in buying some of their tourism holdings. So that's the tourism businesses, which are not their core ones. And this also, today we had an offer for SLI Systems.
So this is a tech company based out of Christchurch, yes?
That's right. And they had a Texas-based company looking to buy them. And that offer was, I think, up to, well, they're willing to pay...
Almost twice, wasn't it?
Yeah, up to 63 cents. And so that saw their share price jump quite a lot today. They were up 87%. So yesterday, rather on Friday, because our market was closed on Monday, they closed Friday at 30 cents and they closed today at 56 cents.
Do we know what's happening with that deal potentially? Because there's, I think, about 60 jobs in Christchurch with that company.
Well, you know, these companies are not being bought because they're looking to just take them apart. These are not corporate raiders. These are by and large, the companies that are looking to buy in this environment are looking to grow through acquisition rather than by developing their own assets. It's much better value these days to buy existing companies that are in that position where they're just starting to turn a profit. That's the kind of companies that we're seeing being taken over. And a lot of the offers that are coming in are not hostile takeover bids. They tend to be, scheme of arrangements. That's a new kind of way for companies to take over businesses here in New Zealand. We have, in the past, we had a takeovers that was just basically, more like a less friendly. These days, companies want to do a deal with the board. That's what Fletcher Building was trying to do with Steel and Tube, but Steel and Tube weren't interested. And at that time, Fletcher had offered $1.70, upped their offer to $1.90, even offered to include in there a 5-cent provision for an interim dividend as well, which was sort of basically $1.95. Steel and Tube board still wasn't interested, and then New Zealand Steel came in and took them on for $1.75, I think, 74 about there, yeah.
Okay, so while New Zealand companies are hot property, what's been happening on the market today?
Look, it's not a good day on the market for sure. Our local index, it dropped 1.5%. So we weren't that bad earlier on in the day, but once Australia opened, Asia opened, the mood was definitely down. So we fell nearly 1.5%. That's 129 points down to 8,673. We haven't seen those levels since the end of May. The ASX 200, which is the leader market in Australia, was down 0.8, and in Asia it was looking quite bad.
What's driving it?
It's a number of things. It's the Saudi Arabian thing with the murder of the journalist there. European stocks are worried about Italy and their budget that they're trying to push through. Brexit talks, that's not going that well.
People marching in the streets.
There's all of that, and of course the other underlying thing, which is the trade worries that through the ongoing battle, lest we forget, between China and the United States, there's a lot of things for people to worry about, and that's definitely turning the market sour, yeah.
And before you head off, New Zealand dollar, how are we looking?
Well, not bad actually. We're steady, 65.4 US cents, 92.5 Australian, and 50.4 pence.
Thanks, Nona. And last year, reporter Max Toll travelled the length of the country to gauge the national mood ahead of the election for a political series Beyond the Beehive. Now, as part of RNZ's One Year On series, he's checking the nation's pulse once again. Has the coalition government had any real impact on people's lives in the 12 months since it came to power? In today's first episode, Max looks at housing and he begins his journey in the far north.
The government wants everyone to have a warm, dry, safe home. But that's something that's out of reach for so many people here in Kaitaia and across the far north. The National Māori Housing Network got $15 million in the coalition government's first budget, and in August, the government hosted a Māori housing finance wānanga, but there's no sign yet of the dedicated Māori housing unit Labour promised before the election. We're heading into town to meet Ricky Houghton, who has helped home hundreds of people in the region, whether in emergency housing or a place of their own. His He Korowai Trust builds and runs the Whare Ora rent-to-buy housing development on the outskirts of Kaitaia. He reckons the situation in Northland is so bad, he asked the previous government twice to declare a state of emergency, which they wouldn't do.
The housing situation for Māori is at its lowest levels of all time in terms of the trend of home ownership. There's no rental accommodation available. They're living in cow sheds, buses, lean-tos, caravans, overcrowded situations, and sadly it's getting worse. Do I think that the Labour Party's going to deliver? I've personally talked with the Minister. He's offered the promise of help. I'm excited that I even have that sort of dialogue from up here in Kaitaia. I'm grateful for it.
What's the significance of turning 50 acres of European land into 50 acres of Māori land?
We've wanted to develop a Māori model that was quite different to the other models that are out in the market there. So self-sustainability is at the front of everything Whare Ora represents. We're not selling houses, we're selling homes.
Rosalina Rehana lives in Whare Ora with her young family. Her road to secure housing hasn't been easy. As a young mother in Auckland, she got caught living with her partner while receiving a benefit and was sentenced to home detention. She used the time to start a home hairdressing business before making the huge decision to move north.
This is my room, where no magic happens.
What's your story?
I guess I wasn't really all together when I moved up north. I kind of came up here to find kind of solace for me and my kids. I went through a bit of a rough time in Auckland and felt like I needed to move closer to my roots.
So you own this place?
Not yet.
Not yet, but
no.
In a few
but
years?
I will, yeah. You've got a 3-year probation in the house, which is basically to help you get all your debt sorted. You have a budgeter at the trust, which helps you stay on track. And that's just so that you are financially able to go forward and apply for your own home loan. So the whole kaupapa of this place was that we could all become self-sufficient, which means dairy farms. So we'll have our own beef. We've got our own community garden. And there's little projects we're going to be working on, like getting our own pigs for our scraps, chickens for eggs. It's really just a community effort so that we can all dig in and all kind of look after each other and try and cut the cost of living.
If this is what we do with a little support, just try and imagine what we could do with a lot of support.
What specific help could the government give?
This is my wish list.
Give me your wish list.
This is my wish list. Okay then, I would like government to support the trust by funding us over longer periods. I mean, you can't get funding beyond 3 years. So if you go out and buy a capital asset, a minimum of a 20-year mortgage, but you're in 3-year funding cycles, it's very hard to commit given the investment that you have to make. I will personally go out. I've done it. I've mortgaged my house on more than 2 occasions to help provide what you see around you. But that will only do so much. It's going to take all of our efforts. There's no silver bullet. As far as I'm concerned, the solution's not going to come from a hole in the wall in the middle of Kaitaia. They're not going to come from Wellington. They have to come from us.
Ricky isn't the only one still clinging to the dream of home ownership for his people. After years of steep price rises, the Auckland housing market is finally starting to level out, and there's massive demand for the government's KiwiBuild scheme, with more than 40,000 people registered and counting. But although about 8,000 KiwiBuild homes have been announced in the region, only 18 of them have actually been built so far. On our next stop, we'll meet a young family who have already secured their place on the great Kiwi property ladder. We are going to meet Pranav and Monik Biela, who a few months ago, astonishingly, managed to buy their first ever home. Now, this home isn't quite a home yet. Right now, it's just a construction site, but they've got pretty big dreams. But Auckland's overheated market nearly destroyed that dream.
Hiya. The problems we faced was, first of all, it was lack of knowledge. We thought it was just like, okay, this house is in our budget, and okay, cool, we'll go and have a look. But then we just lost out on maybe like 10 or 12 deals, like actually putting an offer and losing out, and then
were many offers accepted, and then you lost out?
Yeah, a few of them
there
were
was
accepted.
There was one accepted out Gleneden actually. Everything was fine, bank approved it, and then the last step was the builder who had to do the give us the builder's report. Turned out it was just a massive leaky house. Really? Like it had like 40% moisture. That was just really disheartening because
40% moisture.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. It was just like water seeping into the walls there, and we had already imagined of where the furniture will be and everything. It's crazy.
Do you feel like the government is doing enough to help people like you?
KiwiBuild came 2-3 months ago.
We tried in Hobsonville.
We did try in Hobsonville, yes, yeah. But even though it sounds good and it's affordable, there's only 200-300 houses which are going to be allotted for 20,000-30,000 people, so there's 19,000 people who miss out, so that's another thing to watch out for. But then also saying that it's affordable when it's like a two-bedroom house for 600,000. I mean, that is absolutely not affordable. Like, people can actually buy a house for less than 600,000. For a young person who is trying to get into the market, getting a debt of more than $500,000 is ridiculous.
But you must be stoked. You've got your little slice of heaven, huh?
Yeah.
And a rescue helicopter pilot is pleading with drone users to follow the rules after a near miss on their way to a serious car crash in Northland. The drone was flying well above the legal limit and came within 3 or 4 metres of the chopper. Our reporter Sarah Robson spoke to pilot James Taylor about what happened on Sunday evening.
Just before 8 o'clock in the evening, we were tasked to a car crash up in Northland. So we had just taken off from our base at Mechanics Bay and we're heading up over North Shore, over Takapuna. We're up at about 1,300 feet, which is about 400 metres up, and suddenly saw a drone flash past the right-hand side of the aircraft, pretty close.
Do you know how close?
I'd estimate probably 3 to 4 metres away, no more than that, and maybe just fractionally below the helicopter, but again, not much below it, certainly way closer than you want to see a drone when you're flying at 230 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, how concerning is it seeing a drone when you're up that high and you're on your way to an emergency incident?
The concern is that there are people out there who don't realise what risks they're making by flying their drones in those sort of places. I mean, having actually seen the drone, by the time you've seen it, it's been and gone. because they're so small that they are pretty much impossible to see when you're flying along. So actually, I guess seeing it's a good thing because it meant we hadn't hit it. If it had been any closer, we probably wouldn't have seen it at all. We'd have just heard it hit.
And what sort of risks does that carry?
Could be pretty serious. I mean, it depends exactly where it hit and also what sort of drone it was, but some of them can be reasonably big and heavy, and at the sort of speeds we fly at, there's a good chance it would smash the windscreen if it hit our windscreen, or if it hit our rotors or tail rotor, then it could do some fairly significant damage there. So I guess absolute worst case, potentially it could actually take the helicopter down or seriously injure somebody in the helicopter.
Is this the first time you've had a near miss like this with a drone?
Certainly this close, yes. We do see drones around, and because a lot of our work involves us flying around at low level, we sort of expect to see them because there are more and more of them out there. This is the first time I've seen one that high up and that close to me.
What's your message to people who are using drones?
The message is that if you're flying your drone, I mean, they're great bits of kit and very useful tools for people, but you need to know what the rules are around flying them. And for the standard unlicensed drone operators, that means they have to stay below 120 metres. They have to keep the drone in sight. They're not allowed to fly it within 4 kilometres of an active airfield or helipad. And they have to have permission to fly over private property, and I think probably all of those rules were being broken by that particular drone. But I think the problem is it's an education thing. There's probably a lot of people out there with drones who've got no idea that those rules even exist.
And that was rescue helicopter James Taylor. Now, he was speaking to our reporter Sarah Robson there. The Civil Aviation Authority has been told about the near miss, but it says it can't investigate at this stage because it doesn't have enough information about who was operating the drone. Now, if someone does come forward with details, an investigation could be launched. To breaking news now, emergency services are responding to an incident in Avondale where a train struck a pedestrian shortly before 5 o'clock tonight. The pedestrian suffered moderate injuries, but Auckland Transport is warning train users to expect disruption to schedules on the Western Line this evening. Meanwhile, disruption caused by a bus strike has been just a fraction of what Auckland Transport forecast after more drivers turned up for work than were expected. More than 150 drivers at Ritchie's Murphy, Pavlovich and Go Bus walked out this morning, affecting routes across West and South Auckland and Waikato. Jill Bonnet was on the picket line at Manukau Transport Centre and filed this report.
Lena Walker, who's been a bus driver for about 40 years, says drivers are pleased at the support they got from passing motorists and bus passengers. She says the long hours they work are exhausting.
I'm 60 plus now, and they say, you know, when you get older, you're supposed to work less, but not these days. You know, the hours, you've got to work there really long hours to get a decent wage. Me, I do 11 hours, 5 minutes a day.
Lena Walker says negotiations with Ritchie's have been going on for 6 months. Her colleague, Arahia Rind, says drivers at other companies are earning $2 an hour more, and the 50 cents an hour extra that they're being offered won't stretch very far.
A milk and a bread, and that's about it. That's not going to pay the bills or our rent.
Jared Abbott from First Union says even if drivers were paid the market rate in Auckland, they would have to do split shifts that keep them away from home for up to 14 hours a day. He says they were estimating 200 drivers going on strike. Passengers had been warned that 25 routes run by Ritchie's Murphy and Pavlovich would be affected all day. Ritchie's declined to comment, but Pavlovich's chief executive, Bernard Pavlovich, says the strike announced at 4 a.m. on a public holiday was a mystery to them. He says First Union makes a lot of claims, but the rhetoric doesn't reflect the reality.
For First Union to take a strike action over 3 companies in different cities all at once, it's very much a semi-political statement, I suppose, not necessarily politics, but they're certainly trying to make a statement, and really the issues aren't specific to us.
Bernard Pavlovich says the union hasn't initiated negotiations since the collective agreement expired last month. He says 30 out of 150 drivers were in the union, and the strike affected fewer than 5% of their bus trips this morning. An Auckland Transport spokesperson, James Ireland, says less frequent services will have left some passengers waiting longer than usual, and it seems some made alternative arrangements.
The roads were quite quiet this morning, so that could be because some people took an extra day off, the long weekend. I noticed this morning on my train into work it was busier than usual, which would indicate to me that some people decided to take the train instead of the bus.
Mr Ireland says there was roughly half the amount of disruption expected during this morning's rush hour because more bus drivers came into work than expected. School buses, trains and ferries are running as normal. A strike at Go Bus in Hamilton finished at 9 o'clock this morning. A company spokesperson says it's in mediation with workers through the Employment Relations Authority and wouldn't comment while that was ongoing. Back at the picket line in South Auckland, drivers were showing their support for the more than 30 drivers waving placards and flags. One of them, Kevin Clough, says drivers are working 6-day weeks and want a level playing field.
We've got lives at stake. People take their lives into our hands when we hop behind that wheel of a bus. And people don't realise the hours that some of us are working.
Kevin Clough says they had a good turnout for the picket and a lot of support from passing motorists. For Checkpoint, Jill Bonnet.
To overseas news now, Hong Kong is now linked directly to Macau and mainland China via the world's longest sea bridge. The 55-kilometre bridge is being officially opened today, almost a decade after construction first began. It cost $20 billion and is built to withstand earthquakes and typhoons. It will cut journey times between Hong Kong and the Chinese city of Heuheu from 3 hours to 30 minutes. But as BBC's Katie Silver reports, it hasn't been without controversy.
The crossing, which includes a snaking road bridge, goes underwater via 2 artificial islands, allowing ships to pass. After 9 years of construction, enthusiasm is rife.
I think this bridge will bring great convenience to the whole of Zhuhai, Hong Kong and Macau and promote the economic development of the whole area of the Pearl River Delta.
Today I'm off duty, so I have taken my child to see the bridge. It's magnificent.
The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge spans 55 kilometres and will allow commuters to travel from Macau to Hong Kong along the Pearl River estuary in about an hour. The distance is 20 times the length of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. But it's only a third of the Danyang-Kusang Grand Bridge, which, at 165 kilometres, is the world's longest bridge, connecting Shanghai and Nanjing. But the bridge has been dogged by delays and budget overruns. There have been corruption prosecutions and even the deaths of construction workers. 3, 2, 1. It comes a month after a high-speed rail link was launched, connecting Hong Kong to dozens of cities in mainland China. Critics say these infrastructure projects are examples of Beijing tightening its grip on the semi-autonomous city, while others say they'll bring both sides great economic benefits.
Katie Silver reporting there. Well, this next story will just blow your mind. Americans are snapping up lottery tickets in the hope of winning what will be the biggest payout in history. The latest Mega Millions jackpot is being drawn tomorrow. It is worth, wait for it, $1.6 billion. The Powerball draw is also happening. The winner of that one will, well, they'll just get a paltry $600 million. Here's the BBC's Tim Allman with the details and, more importantly, the odds.
Hope springs eternal on the streets of Manhattan, especially when a combined prize of more than $2 billion is on offer. No one has won the Mega Millions or the Powerball, so the jackpot keeps getting bigger and bigger.
I believe I've already won, because I believe in the law of attraction, so what's meant to be is already going to be. A lot of people go crazy and they panic and everybody wants to win, but if you already believe you won.
I never played the lotto. I'm coming out for the special one, just to try to see if I can get a chance to win some billions, take care of some people, help some people.
It could be you, but the odds aren't on your side. The chances of winning the jackpot stand at 1 in 303 million. To put that into context, your chances of being eaten by a shark are only 1 in 3.7 million. and there's only a 1 in 300,000 chance you could be killed by lightning. If you do win the Mega Millions, this will be your dilemma. Take 1.6 billion over a period of 29 years, or just settle for around 900 million in a lump sum. Decisions. But what if no one wins? Well, then we all try again, and the jackpot gets bigger still.
And what would you do with all that money? Well, Tim Allman there amid lottery fever in Manhattan. And in case you are wondering, it is the equivalent of 1.6 billion US, which is almost 2.5 billion New Zealand dollars. So your money would go further if you had that here. Well, after 6 tonight, what impact has the Jamie Lee Ross saga had on National? And Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she would expect that women and children would be given priority if Australia takes up our offer to take 150 refugees and asylum seekers. Now, as you know, we would love to hear your feedback. Don't forget, you can text us, that would be on 2101, or you can tweet us, and that is at Checkpoint RNZ. Facebook us, Checkpoint, or old-fashioned email is great too, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Greens say politicians have a responsibility to address the rot that is sexual harassment in the workplace, and the National leader's promises to seek advice is a good start. Simon Bridges is speaking with Parliamentary Services and getting independent advice to find out what he can do to ensure women feel safe in his employ following allegations of harassment against Jamie Lee Ross. Newsroom published anonymous accounts from 4 women of sexual harassment and bullying by the former National MP, which he denied last week. But Mr Ross has admitted to an affair with a fellow MP and apologised to a woman he admits he behaved inappropriately towards during a local body campaign his wife was running in. Greens co-leader Marama Davidson says she's pleased to see this step taken by Mr Bridges, but it's only a start.
I don't think one inquiry is going to be enough to clean up the mess. Politicians have a responsibility to sort things out so that New Zealanders can have trust and confidence in the whole political process.
The Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson. Now, an abusive text sent to Jamie Lee Ross has been revealed to Checkpoint. It was sent by a female MP that Mr Ross has admitted having a relationship with. The text is 61 words long and was sent in August. The message, along with other texts, was provided by a supporter of the Botany MP with his permission. It includes a slew of abuse and personal insults about Mr Ross's appearance and personality, and concludes by saying, "You deserve to die." The Prime Minister wants to hear from New Zealanders as to whether they want the political donation rules changed. A recording released last week by the former National MP Jamie Lee Ross of he and Simon Bridges talking about a $100,000 donation from a wealthy businessman, Zhang Yi-Quinn, has reopened the debate about transparency and financial contributions to campaigns. The debate in the past has been about whether taxpayers should fund political campaigns instead of private donors. Jacinda Ardern says if that's what the public want, she's open to change.
I'd rather not having to focus on fundraising and donations to run political campaigns, but at the moment we're reliant on them for democracy. And so, look, if the public want to have that debate, I'm open to hearing it from them.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. A foreign exchange trader is facing fraud charges over a Ponzi scheme that lost investors $7 million. Kelvin Clive Wood appeared in the Auckland District Court today on representative charges of obtaining by deception and theft by a person in a special relationship. The Serious Fraud Office says that over an 8-year period, Mr Wood used new investors' funds to pay other investors their reported gains or to refund their principal investment. It says 18 investors lost at least $7 million, with the largest investors losing more than $1 million each. Mr Wood has been remanded on bail until his next court appearance next month. The US President Donald Trump says the US will begin cutting off or substantially reducing the aid it gives to El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. Up to 7,000 Central American migrants are now travelling through southern Mexico on their way to the US. Mr Trump says their home countries have failed to stop them, and he's alerted the US military and Border Patrol. But one of the migrants, Danilo Giron, says there's nothing the US president can do to stop the group.
Trump says that he'll send the National Guard and the military to the border. He's protecting his country, but he's not the owner of the United States or the world. He's not God, and the United States is supposed to be a country of migrants, and the migrants have made it powerful. But if he wants to do that, well, do it, but we will try anyway.
A Honduran migrant, Danilo Giron. The migrants are hoping to apply for asylum when they reach the US border. High temperatures in the South Island will give way to rain and cold later in the week. Today's warm weather was 8 degrees above the October average, reaching up to 26 degrees in parts of inland Canterbury. But the Met Service duty forecaster April Clark says a cold front moving over the lower South Island late tomorrow is expected to drop Dunedin temperatures by 10 degrees overnight. The front will reach the rest of the South Island and the lower North Island on Thursday, bringing a 6-degree drop in temperatures as far north as Gisborne. April Clark says the chill in the air will also bring a decent amount of rain.
A dose of heavy rain, particularly for places in the South Island. Fiordland's under a heavy rain warning at the moment. Strong nor'westerlies as well, so places like Wellington, we're going to more spring-like conditions with strong northerlies tomorrow. It could be gale about exposed places as well.
April Clark. Parts of Westland can also expect heavy rain, but nothing extreme. It's 6:05. Sport, the Black Ferns Sevens captain Sarah Goss is favoured to head off teammates Michaela Blyde and Portia Woodman for World Rugby's Women's Sevens Player of the Year, but she doesn't see it that way. The trio have been named as finalists for the award, meaning a New Zealander is guaranteed to win. Goss is the favourite after starting in every game in 2018 and leading the team to both Commonwealth Games and World Cup gold, but she's quick to play down suggestions she's got it in the bag.
No, geez, no, not at all. I admire the way that they play, and I'm just pretty lucky that they've got heaps of speed, so then we can just, us middles just have to give them the ball and they're going to score every time. So just to be nominated is a huge honour, and whatever happens, it doesn't really matter because the Kiwis going to win it anyway.
Sarah Goss. After nearly a year and a half out through injury, all-rounder Corey Anderson is to return to the Black Caps, having been added to the 2020 squad for the side's upcoming series against Pakistan in the UAE. Anderson's currently in Dubai captaining the New Zealand A side against Pakistan A, but hasn't played for the Black Caps since the Champions Trophy tournament in June last year because of ongoing back problems which required surgery. New Zealand tennis player Michael Venus has qualified for the ATP World Tour Finals in London next month for the second straight year. The world doubles number 12 and his South African doubles partner Raven Klaasen have been confirmed as the sixth pair to qualify for the prestigious season-ending event. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Bollinger samples the latest from Princess Chelsea. This week's cultural ambassador Mona Lynn Courteau shares a few Latin American musical delights, and we go on a sound odyssey to Georgia, where Welsh singer Charlotte Church teams up with a local male choir. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Bay of Plenty, Coromandel Peninsula, Taupo and Taihape, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Mainly fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud, isolated afternoon and evening showers possible. Waitomo and Taumaranui to Wellington, cloudy periods, a few drizzle patches tomorrow evening. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. A few spots of rain in South Canterbury late tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods. Rain in Fiordland with some heavy falls from this evening, spreading into southern Westland tomorrow, a few showers developing further north. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy with scattered light rain today, rain becoming more widespread tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands cloudy, a few drizzle patches from tomorrow afternoon. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Well, a new political opinion poll indicates the furore over Rogue MP Jamie Lee Ross has only slightly dented National's fortunes. The One News Colmar Brunton poll was taken between Monday and Friday last week. It shows the Labour Party was up 3 points to 45%, while National was down 2 points to 43%. However, the poll was the first time since February that Labour was ahead ahead of National. And political scientist Dr. Bryce Edwards joins us now on the phone. Bryce, while the numbers may seem small, how significant is this for National?
I think National will be quite pleased with this poll. I mean, going down only 2% after their biggest nightmare since, well, maybe dirty politics or further back, I think they will be very happy to be on 43% at the end of that disaster week. And for Labour to only go up 3% to 45% must be a huge relief. Simon Bridges not so happy at being down to 7% as preferred Prime Minister and having Judith Collins sort of nipping at his heels, but it's not a disaster poll for National.
OK, a few things there. Let's start with Labour. So you say that they will, well, I mean, they've moved up, only 3 points though, but the significant thing is that it is the first time they have been ahead of National since February.
And that's a huge confidence boost for them because, well, I mean, if you think about how often Labour's been ahead of National over the last 10 years, there's only been about 2 polls, I think, that's had them ahead. So, you know, they will be loving being the biggest party in the land at the moment in terms of support. And so, you know, having National no longer being at the top of the polls will be, difficult for National, for their confidence, because they have really liked to keep pushing this idea that they're the biggest party. And they are still the biggest party in Parliament, but, it's a confidence thing, and it matters to National about being the biggest party.
We know that people were being polled during last week. Arguably, could this be the beginning of a demise with National's numbers, just the start, rather than the complete picture?
Oh, look, I think all of us have just been watching last week's, trauma with our mouths open, not knowing how to react. And it seems that voters, likewise, or National voters at least, likewise, they're not ready to abandon ship. They are, still waiting to see what happens. So you're right, this could be the start of things going more further south for them. But, it's just been a topsy-turvy ride where, during the week, Simon Bridges looked quite strong at times, and then he looked weak, and then strong again. And, it was good and bad news. So people still seem a bit unmovable. And these are really small numbers in terms of the movements because they are real sort of margin of error stuff. This would be quite, just during any normal time, these sort of poll shifts would be seen as very minor, yet they come after a traumatic week. So I'm quite stumped myself.
Well, interesting, yes, small numbers for the parties, but when you look at Simon Bridges and the preferred Prime Minister stakes, you're in single digits, Bryce, you're 7%.
Yeah.
And party leaders are always keen to say, the public don't vote for me as a leader, but at some point, do you lose your mandate to lead when you're in single digits?
I think so. Down in single digits is a real danger. And I think in the past, Simon Bridges might have got away with saying that I'm still the new leader, people don't know who I am, my name hasn't really got cut through yet. Well, his name got huge cut through last week. Everyone knew who the National Party leader was last week. So, they know who he is, but they're still saying no to him. So it is a problem, and also because he's been quite lucky, or, he's been comfortable because there has been no obvious contender to replace him. And now we see that contender. It's obvious who would step in, I think, if suddenly Bridges had to stand down.
You mean Judith Collins?
Yeah. So she's on 5%, just below him on 7%, and that, in some ways, it shows what we saw, kind of about this time last year, or a bit longer ago, back when Andrew Little was leader of the opposition, and he was also doing very badly, and his deputy Jacinda Ardern was starting to creep up, and that's when people start to talk a lot more about time for Andrew Little to step down and have Jacinda Ardern take over. We might start seeing a bit more of that conversation, given that she's the clear contender.
What do you make of the fact that New Zealand First has remained constant, 5% no change? Would you have expected Winston Peters to make some gains out of this?
I don't think so, no, because at the moment he's been playing very aggressive towards National, and so for National voters, or people that are currently supportive of National, Winston Peters is the biggest enemy. He's their biggest opponent, not Labour, probably not even the Greens. So I just can't see people going from National to New Zealand First at the moment. I think they're much more likely to consider Jacinda Ardern and Labour a good place to shift their vote to. So, yes, I think New Zealand First will be disappointed by this poll, but they're probably about the only ones, actually, because everyone else should be quite happy. Like I said, National, to only go down to 2% will be quite happy. Labour will be happy to now be the biggest party. The Greens are up 1 to 7, so they're the third party. It's really only Simon Bridges and New Zealand First that will be particularly unhappy with this poll.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. That is Dr. Bryce Edwards, political scientist there. Just to catch you up on that, Colmar-Brunton, One News Colmar-Brunton poll showing that Labour is up 3 points to 45% and National is down 2 points to 43%. The significant thing about this is it is the first time that Labour has polled ahead of National since February. In the preferred Prime Minister stakes, Simon Bridges is down to the single digits, 7% there. Jacinda Ardern sitting on 42%. Australia's Labour opposition says it's now willing to discuss a stalled government bill. The bill would allow New Zealand to take in 150 asylum seekers being held in Australia's offshore detention centres. Both major parties in Australia have been criticised for their actions in keeping vulnerable and sick children and families on Nauru and Manus Island. Following increased political pressure on the Australian government, the solution could become a reality. Alex Perrottet reports.
The Scott Morrison government has been sensationally reduced to a minority in the lower house of Parliament after the weekend's by-election in Malcolm Turnbull's seat of Wentworth. And one major policy platform of the independent winner of the seat, Dr. Kerryn Phelps, was to end the exile of hundreds of refugees and asylum seekers in Nauru and Manus Island. For years, doctors and medical staff working in Nauru have called for sick refugees, particularly children, to be treated off-island. Dr. Vernon Reynolds is a child and adolescent psychiatrist who worked in Nauru for almost 2 years. He says the uncertainty of the situation has left many in a critical state.
And it is that uncertainty and that prolonged detention that has really drained their resilience and led them to become more and more hopeless and depressed.
When New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern visited Nauru in September, she repeated her offer to resettle 150 refugees here, and she played a straight bat when asked again today.
Our offer, as I've continually reiterated, remains on the table regardless of what discussion's being had in Australia.
Now, Australia's Labour opposition has come back to the table to negotiate with the government in an attempt to take up the New Zealand offer. Labour says it's all about the children, but the party has blocked the government's previous bill to enable the resettlement. Shane Newman, Labour's Shadow Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, says Labour will support a law, but only on the condition that children need to be removed from Nauru and any lifetime ban on entering Australia should only apply to those refugees who go to New Zealand. On top of that, they propose to limit the law's application to special category visas, which enables open travel of New Zealand citizens into Australia. Mr Newman says these measures close the back door into Australia. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he's keen to close this nightmare chapter.
I'm not going to allow this nightmare to open up again. It was far too painful to actually fix this last time, and no one knows that. No one knows that better than me.
Scott Morrison also told Parliament Labour has no credibility when it comes to dealing with refugees and people smugglers, and any government must have clear policies. But the government hasn't yet been clear on whether it will accept Labour's conditions. We've been told the government, quote, will examine the proposal, take advice and make a response after careful consideration. Meanwhile, New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters earlier sounded warnings on whether those refugees in New Zealand would be regarded as second-class citizens should they be barred from travelling to Australia. But today, the Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway said that wasn't an issue this side of the Tasman.
What we can do as a government here in New Zealand is ensure that we protect the rights and obligations of people in New Zealand under New Zealand law. What Australia does is a matter for Australia.
But not everyone is convinced. Catherine Stubberfield from the United Nations Refugee Agency says any move to block refugees from Nauru or Manus Island from visiting Australia would be discriminatory and it would affect people here.
That is discriminatory. It extends a kind of punishment to those people. If there's a situation in the future where someone has excelled in their career, they're invited back for a conference, they're invited back for a business meeting, there should be no reason they can't live their lives like other New Zealand citizens.
Dr Vernon Reynolds says this week's move to transfer 11 children to Australia for medical treatment signifies a softening in Australia's position, but he says the ball is very much in their court and there's been enough playing politics.
This is an Australian issue. The Australian people and political system need to make a decision to bring these people into Australia, and then, by all means, New Zealand will take them. But actually, we need action now, not after some political wranglings and umming and ahhing. I think action is needed. It's well overdue.
Ian Lees-Galloway says the 150 places is allowed within the current financial year and they would be included in the revised refugee quota. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have arrived in Fiji for the Pacific leg of their 16-day tour down under. The couple were greeted by a guard of honour and have received a traditional welcome. But local journalists are up in arms over being barred from the official media pool. Fiji journalists say only UK journalists and the government's media advisors are allowed in the pool, while all other local media are restricted to what's called the fixed pool and can only attend 2 official events. Island's business magazine correspondent Heuheu Movono says it's unfair and discriminatory.
They've separated us into 2 groups, which look to me like the privileged and the not so privileged. So those of us in the fixed media group are the ones that don't have access to all of the events. We only have access to 2 events, and even then it's in these fixed positions that they've actually kind of cordoned off for us. And we don't get to go to particular events where the other people get to go to. For example, the Queen's Canopy opening up in our forest park, just about 10 kilometres or so outside of the city.
And she says it's not exactly clear who set the rules.
Some are more equal than others, and is not quite sure where the rules are coming from. But one thing is for sure, everyone is passing the buck to everyone else. They're calling it the palace. They're saying this has come from the palace. This is palace protocol. And when I questioned the British High Commission office on it, we were told everything is being selected by the government.
Heuheu Movono says the Fiji government has also given the television feed to the national broadcaster, but hasn't shared it with other commercial outlets. And Fiji Times deputy editor Eleanor Basalele says the restricted positions place them in front of large screens and their photographers can't get their own shots. Now she says non-government media outlets have to attend the Holiday Inn hotel after each event to collect information and photos on a USB stick, which is given to them by officials.
We don't know who to believe, but it's a bit of an insult to the local media that they're not able to cover something happening in their own country. And for an event so big and so important. For the Fiji Times, we pride ourselves in writing Fiji's history for the last 149 years. We wrote about the first royal visit in 1881, and since then we've been covering the royal visits in our papers. We've got about 30 reporters out on the field. We've stopped and pulled everybody. We just want to show them, as much barriers you're going to put, we will work harder to get the stories.
Eleanor Basalele says from the Fiji Times there, and the chair of Fiji's Media Industry Development Authority, Ashwin Raj, says he disagrees with the journalists and the protocols are no different to those in other countries. US President Donald Trump is threatening to cut aid to Honduras, Guatemala and El Salvador for failing to stop a caravan of some 7,000 people trying to reach the US border. The migrants are now moving through southern Mexico and they plan to get into the US and try to claim asylum. The BBC's Alem Makbul is travelling with them and filed this report.
More than a week trekking hundreds of miles is taking its toll. A town square just inside Mexico has become a makeshift camp, a place to rest on this long, punishing journey to the United States. But 2/3 of the route from their home country of Honduras still remains ahead of them.
Every day we get more and more tired, but everything that is happening back in Honduras
And the thought of the future of my children is what motivates me to keep going.
But Mexicans have come out in force to help the Honduran migrants, providing free medicines and treatment, and coming to donate clothes. This, though, is just the first group of people heading through the region to America. Many more are following in what's starting to feel like an exodus. Of course, migrants head to the US from Honduras every year, but why so many at once right now? If we travel alone, it's dangerous, says Karen, who's 17. In a group, we feel safe, so when it started, I joined, and it kept growing. Well, Donald Trump now says he's going to cut millions of dollars in aid to Central American countries because they haven't been able to stop people making this migration. But all around us, we can see people from those very countries driven to do this because of the extreme poverty back home. Right along the route, local people and aid agencies have provided sustenance, but this is still no easy undertaking. We're just simple people, Jose Rodriguez tells me. There's no work back home, so we have to go elsewhere. We're not looking for problems with anyone. We just want to provide for our families. This may have become a political story in the United States, but as they prepare to resume their tough journey, it's clear what's brought so many people together is not politics, but sheer desperation.
Ali Makbul in Mexico with that report. More than 600,000 international tourists head out on 3-hour-plus hikes in New Zealand every year. And that figure is set to grow as more and more visitors set their sights on an outdoor adventure. While most international trampers make it back safely, recent deaths have prompted a call from DOC and police for New Zealanders to step up and talk to tourists about staying safe outdoors. Here's our tourism reporter Tess Brunton.
Hong Kong tourist Carrie Kwan has been exploring New Zealand's outdoors, visiting Franz Joseph Glacier and Queenstown. Speaking to RNZ while sightseeing in Dunedin, Ms Kwan says she researched ahead before arriving.
It's okay for me, because my English is okay. Not too difficult for me to search information. But if the others, they can't speak very well in English, maybe it's a bit difficult for them. Maybe they should join some local tours.
But Ms Kwan says tourists who don't speak much English might struggle to stay informed or understand outdoor risks.
I've prepared many clothes here because I saw from the internet that it may snow this week. So I prepared 2 down jackets and 2 wool jackets to prepare if there is snow.
The New Zealand Mountain Safety Council reports 57 trampers have lost their lives in the last 10 years to June last year, with international tourists accounting for nearly half of those deaths. Search and rescue operations were launched for more than 3,600 trampers over the same period. So just how prepared are tourists who venture into New Zealand's great outdoors?
Was there any safety messages that anyone told you or no?
No, just travelling around and meet people and be open-minded.
Not much. I just know the weather is complicated. It might change rapidly. So I take that into account.
I don't know. Relatively safe here in New Zealand?
Yeah, safer than in other countries.
Yes, we were pretty prepared. You know, we read the signs, but we already had all the hiking gear we needed.
It was sunny, but too much snow on the summit, so we couldn't climb to the top because we didn't have any crampons and just boots.
I have all the gear, but for example, I don't bring any radio so far.
The Department of Conservation Visitor Risk Principal Advisor Don Bogey says it's an individual's, not DOC's, responsibility to keep themselves safe outdoors.
The New Zealand weather is really unforgiving. If you get caught out without the right clothing or equipment, things can go from a nice day to a really unpleasant and then a really dangerous one really fast.
Instead, the department provides tourists with information, builds huts and places signs and markers on tracks to encourage outdoor safety. Don Bogey says social media encourages a lot of tourists to do hikes they haven't researched or prepared for.
All those really neat photos don't really show you the hazards, and that you do need to, look into, is the weather okay? Do I have the right footwear? Do I have the right skills to walk to that place?
DOC and the police recently called for New Zealanders to proactively help inform tourists of the risks after an Indian tourist died while hiking on the Tongariro crossing earlier this month. It was the second tourist death in the area within weeks. Tourism Industry Aotearoa Advocacy Manager Steve Hanrahan agrees, saying communities need to play a strong role in visitor safety. He says tourists should consider hiring a guide for alpine tramps.
Safety is a key part of the visitor experience, and people come to New Zealand to experience the outdoors, but they don't always identify the risks when planning their outdoor experience. So we want people to have safe and enjoyable experience and return again.
The TIA manages tourist safety website supportadventure.co.nz and works with other organisations to promote safety in the outdoors. It has 4 main pieces of advice for trampers regardless of where they're from. Stay in a group, keep an eye on the weather, be prepared to turn back and take sufficient supplies. Mō te hōtaka o te ahipone, ko te Sprunton tēnei.
Well, we're getting feedback from a few of you this evening about Jamie Lee Ross. You're wanting to know who initiated the move to detain Jamie Lee Ross, who was involved in his removal to mental health care, was anyone injured before or after the removal, where was he removed from, where is he now, is he able to communicate with his doctor, lawyer and friends, is the media able to contact and interview him and get his point of view, is it possible because he had sensitive, revealing recordings of his colleagues in the National Party that there have been moves to quiet him? Well, we would love to answer a lot of those questions for you. As you would have heard earlier in the show, we did ask Simon Bridges and Paula Bennett on. Both declined to be interviewed. We will continue to bring you more on that story over the next few days. But that is Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lisa Owen, and thank you so much from me and the Checkpoint team. Have a great evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. National has taken a hit in the latest political poll, dropping below Labour for the first time since the change of government. The One News Colmar Brunton poll has Labour up 3 on 45%, with National at 43%, down 2 points. It was taken last week as the Jamie Lee Ross saga unfolded. The Prime Minister wants to hear from New Zealanders on changing the rules for funding political campaigns after a recording of MPs talking about a $100,000 donation was made public by former National Party MP Jamie Lee Ross. A man hit by a train at the Layard Street station in the Auckland suburb of Avondale just before 5 o'clock has been taken to hospital with moderate injuries. Auckland Transport says St Jude's Road near the train crossing is closed and traffic is being diverted down Layard and Donegal streets. And the police say